students, welcome to today's class. Today we are looking the revision chapter 10, history, new empires and kingdoms. In this chapter we have already learned this chapter. We are going through some of the important points. You just underline the points with the pencil. Some kings and their deeds, it is inscribed in pillars or somewhere inscriptions written in the walls, and some of the kings, what they have done in their kingdoms, and the emergence of new kingdoms, that things we are discussing in this chapter. Samudragupta was a famous ruler of the dynasty of Guptas, underline Samudragupta. His inscriptions inscribed on the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. It was composed as a kavya by Harisena, underline Harisena, Allahabad, and he was the poet at the court of Samudragupta, this Harisena. And in his prashasti or the inscription, it was a Sanskrit word. It means in praise of, that means praising the king. And the Gautami Putri Sri Shadharani, that became the far important more of the Guptas that in chapter 9 we have seen. And here about Samudragupta's prashasti, it is written there, he was a warrior and as a king who won the victories in battle, who was learned at the best of poets. He is also described as equal to the gods. That means the king is equal to God. The prashasti was composed by very long sentence. Here is some verses of the prashasti is given. We can look what are they. In the given map in the textbook, there is information provided in the prashasti. According to that basis, they made this map. Harisena describes 4 different kinds of rulers, and it tells us about the Samudragupta's policies towards them. The first one is there were 9 rulers who were uprooted, and they become the part of Samudragupta empire. Then the rulers of Dakshinabada, there were 12 rulers, and the inner circle of the neighboring state, Assam, Coastal Bengal, Nepal, Janasanghas, they brought tribute, followed his orders, and attended his court. They were subjugated to Samudragupta. And the rulers of outlying areas, that is Kushan, Sakas, Sri Lanka, it is given in the blue color in the map, and they have submitted him and offered daughters in marriage. In the 58 BC, Gupta king Chandragupta II, he defeated the Sakas and assumed the title of Vikramaditya. The genealogy says that the Samudragupta's great-grandfather, grandfather, father and mother. His mother, Kumara Devi, she was belonged to the Lichavi Jana, just underline. And Chandragupta was the first ruler in the Gupta dynasty to adopt the grand title Maharajadiraja, just underline. And his great-grandfather and grandfather are mentioned simply as Maharajas. Only the Chandragupta, the first ruler, assumed the title Maharajadiraja. Samudragupta's son Chandragupta II, we are knowing about him in the inscriptions and coins, and he overcome the last of the Sakas. Just underline the Sakas, inscriptions and coins. According to the later belief, his court was full of learned people. In Chandragupta II's, his court, including Kalidasa, Aryabhatta, an astronomer, a lot of learned people were there in his court. Harshavardhana was the famous ruler of the Gupta dynasty. About him, his court poet Banabhatta wrote his biography. Its name was Harshajarida. Underline Banabhatta and Harshajarida, Harshavardhana. It was in the language of Sanskrit. And Huyansang also was the one of the pilgrim that we have seen in the last chapter. He also wrote about the Harshavardhana in his detailed accounts, or what he saw in the kingdom of Guptas during the ruling time of Harshavardhana. Huyansang also wrote the inscriptions. Harsha was not the eldest son of his father, but he became the king of Taneshwar after the death of his father and elder brother. His brother-in-law was the ruler of Kanauj, underline, and he was killed by the ruler of Bengal. When Harsha took over the kingdom of Kanauj, he led an army against the ruler of Bengal and he conquered Magadha and Bengal. When he tried to cross the Narmada, march into the Deccan, but he was stopped by the ruler of Chalukya dynasty, Pulakesin II. Underline these names and place names. The most important rulers of the South India were Pallavas and Chalukyas. Pallavas, their capital were Kanchipuram, and Aihole, the capital of the Chalukyas. In the Kaveri Delta, while the Chalukyas were centered around the Richar Dobao between the rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra. And there were many religious centers and number of temples were there in the capital Aihole. The best well-known Chalukya ruler was Pulakesin II. We know about him from the Prashasti composed by his court poet Ravikirti. Chalukya's victory was short-lived. The Pallavas and Chalukyas give way to the new rulers, that is Rashtragupta and Chola dynasties. Village was the basic unit of administration, and some important administrative posts were hereditary. Harisena was the chief judicial officer, and some of the important ministers were there. Some Shanti Vigrahiga, they are the meaning Minister of War and Peace, and chief bankers were there, and merchants and caravans or chief craftsmen were there. There were different administrative sections were there in the kingdom. The earlier rulers, they were maintained a well-organized army with elephant, chariots, cavalry and soldiers. There were military leaders. They also provided the troops or the armies whenever the rulers needed them. And these persons were known as Samantas. When the ruler was weak, some of the Samantas tried to become the independent rulers. Some of the local assemblies there, the inscriptions of Pallavas mentioned. That one is Sabha. It is the assembly of Brahmin and landowners. And Ur was the village assembly in the areas, the landowners, they were not Brahmins. And Nagaram was the organization of merchants. It was about these assemblies we are seeing the inscriptions of the Pallavas. The life of the ordinary people in the kingdoms we are knowing about from the plays and poems written by some of the poets and writers. The Kalidasa was a well-known writer in that time, and he wrote in his plays about the languages that speaking the Brahmins and the other people, non-Brahmins, they are using the language of Prakrit. His most famous play, Abhijnana Shakuntalam, says the story and the love between the king named Dushyanta and the young woman named Shakuntala. The Chinese pilgrim Fahian, he noticed a lot of things in the kingdoms and wrote about in his travelogues. And Banabhatta also tries to write about the picture of king's army, that is a big troop, and they are moving one place to another place with the whole facilities in the war. And those things that we are seeing, these things in the inscriptions and the writings of the many people, those who visited the kingdom and those who lived in the kingdom. Arab merchants and sailors played an important role in the sea trade between India and Europe. Around 1400 years ago, Prophet Muhammad introduced a new religion, Islam, in Arabia, and the one supreme God is there, Allah, and his verses written in the book Quran, that is the sacred book of Islam. And within 100 years of Islam spread to North Africa, Spain, Iran and India. Arab sailors who were already familiar with the coastal settlements of subcontinent now brought the new religion with them. Arab soldiers conquered Sindh about 1300 years ago. We have seen the Gupta rulers. Samudra was a famous one, and his policies towards the other kings, the genealogy of the Gupta kings, and Harshavardhana and his policies and writings about the Harshavardhana, and Pallava rulers and Chalukyas, and the Pulakesin II was another famous ruler, and the life of the ordinary people, it is written by the Huyan Sang, what he saw in the kingdom, and religion Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, he started the religion Islam in Arabia. by the traders and sailors. The religion came to India and some other parts of the country. Read the textbook and underline the important points in your textbook itself.